It was a rainy Thursday evening when everything changed. The kind of rain that fell in sheets, blurring the world outside my window and trapping me inside my thoughts. I had just returned home from a long day at work, where every moment felt like an eternity, each task a reminder of how distant I felt from the life I once knew. Lillian was out for her weekly book club meeting, and I was grateful for the solitude. The house was quiet, save for the soft patter of rain against the windowpane and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I settled onto the couch, still wearing my work clothes, and pulled out my phone to check my emails. As I scrolled through the endless barrage of messages, a sudden urge compelled me to check Lillian's phone. She had left it charging on the kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with notifications. My heart raced with an inexplicable mix of guilt and curiosity. I told myself it was just a quick look. I needed to know if she had made any plans for the weekend. As I picked up her phone, I felt a twinge of anxiety. The last thing I wanted was to invade her privacy, but something deep inside me whispered that I needed to. I unlocked her phone using the familiar pattern and opened her messages. What I found shattered my world. There, among the usual exchanges of mundane daily life, was a string of texts between Lillian and Ryan, a slick businessman from her work. At first, the messages seemed innocuous, filled with playful banter and inside jokes. But as I continued scrolling, the tone shifted dramatically. My heart sank as I read their words, laden with innuendos and flirtations that revealed a depth of intimacy I had never witnessed between them. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Just us, like old times," one message read, followed by another. "You know I can't resist you. Just a little longer, and we'll be together." Each text felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into my chest. The realization hit me like a freight train. Lillian was having an affair. I felt the blood rush from my face, leaving me cold and clammy. My hands trembled as I set the phone down on the counter. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make sense of the chaos that had suddenly erupted in my mind. But I stayed silent, paralyzed by the weight of my discovery. For 7 years, I had believed in our love, in the life we were building together. We had our share of arguments and misunderstandings, but never once had I doubted her loyalty, until now. The image of Lillian laughing with Ryan, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of him in passing, replayed in my mind. How could I have been so blind? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Rage and sadness coursed through me, battling for dominance. I knew I should confront her and demand the truth, but a different instinct took over. I decided to keep this knowledge to myself for the time being. I felt a strange sense of control in that decision, as if by holding the secret, I could still dictate the outcome of this terrible revelation. As I sat there in the dim light of our kitchen, the sound of rain pounding against the window felt like a reflection of the turmoil inside me. I couldn't help but wonder how long this had been going on. How many times had Lillian met with Ryan, pretending to be somewhere else, while she was really with him? The questions spun around in my mind like a tornado, and I felt dizzy from the weight of them. I put the phone down, trying to focus on the storm outside, but it was impossible to escape the tempest raging within me. My heart was broken, but my resolve was firm. I would not let her see my pain, at least not yet. I would keep up appearances, maintaining the facade of our happy marriage, while secretly plotting my next move. That evening marked the beginning of a dark journey, a journey where I would hide my anguish behind a mask of normalcy, all while the world I knew crumbled around me. The rain continued to fall, and with each drop, I felt my innocence wash away. I was now a man burdened by secrets, caught in a web of betrayal that threatened to consume everything I held dear. The months that followed my discovery felt like an endless cycle of torment wrapped in a facade of normalcy. Each morning, I would wake up next to Lillian, her soft breathing and peaceful expression a stark contrast to the storm that raged within me. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that the life we built together was untouched by betrayal. But every moment spent in that house felt like a cruel reminder of the deception lurking just beneath the surface. At breakfast, I would watch her as she prepared her coffee, the smell of freshly brewed beans filling the kitchen. We would exchange the same mundane pleasantries we always did, discussing the weather, what we might have for dinner, or the latest updates from her work. I would smile, nod, and offer small talk, all the while feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. I craved to reach out, to shake her from the oblivion she seemed to be in, but the knowledge I held kept me rooted in silence. As the days turned into weeks, I became adept at hiding my pain. I filled my time with work, taking on extra projects, and staying late at the office, anything to distract myself from the truth that weighed so heavily on my heart. My colleagues began to notice my dedication, often praising me for my commitment. Yet, they had no idea that each late night was a desperate attempt to escape the reality of my crumbling marriage. Evenings at home were filled with an artificial warmth. I tried to recreate the intimacy we once shared, planning romantic dinners, surprising her with little gifts, and initiating conversations about our future. But each attempt felt hollow, a mere cover for the anguish I felt inside. I often caught her glancing at her phone, a slight smile playing on her lips, and it made my stomach churn. I was there, present in body but absent in spirit, a mere spectator in the life we once shared. I found myself becoming increasingly paranoid, my mind racing with thoughts of her and Ryan. I started to scrutinize her every action, analyzing the nuances of her behavior. If she took longer than usual to return home from work, my heart would race with dread. If she received a text while I was nearby, I'd hold my breath, praying it wasn't from him. The tension mounted within me, turning into a quiet storm of suspicion that was nearly unbearable. I began to keep tabs on her without her knowing. I'd linger by the window, pretending to be absorbed in a book while watching her leave for work, mentally counting the seconds until she returned. I even drove by her office a couple of times, convinced I could catch a glimpse of her with Ryan. It was a twisted game, one I felt I had no choice but to play. Each day, I became more entrenched in my secret, more determined to unearth the truth, yet terrified of what I might find. One particularly haunting night, the weight of it all became too much. I lay awake, the darkness around me thick and suffocating. Lillian was asleep, her back turned to me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that wrapped around me like a shroud. I had never felt so alone, even in the company of the woman I loved. As I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraled, consuming me in a way I had never experienced before. The betrayal felt like a knife, twisting and turning in my gut, leaving me gasping for air. In those moments of despair, I often wondered what I would do if I confronted her. The idea of laying my heart bare, of revealing the pain she had caused, was paralyzing. What if she denied everything? What if she turned the tables and accused me of being paranoid? My mind raced through the myriad of possibilities, each more painful than the last. I felt trapped in a cycle of fear and anguish, a prisoner in my own home. Despite the turmoil, there were glimmers of hope that occasionally pierced the darkness. I'd see a photo of us from a happier time and feel a fleeting sense of nostalgia. I remembered the love we had shared, the dreams we had built together. Those memories were a bittersweet reminder of what I was losing, what I was fighting to hold on to. But they were also a reminder that love, no matter how profound, could be shattered in an instant. As the days turned into months, the tension only grew. The laughter we once shared faded into awkward silences, and I felt the distance between us widen. I longed for connection, but every attempt to reach out felt forced and false. My heart was heavy with unspoken words, and I found myself teetering on the edge of despair, wondering how long I could keep up this charade before it all came crashing down. Inside, I was a tempest of emotions, betrayal, sadness, anger, and longing all coiled tightly within me. The world outside continued, blissfully unaware of my internal struggle. I was determined to keep up appearances, to maintain the illusion of our perfect life, but I knew that with each passing day, I was losing a piece of myself to the growing darkness. It was a delicate balance, one that felt increasingly impossible to sustain, and the inevitable reckoning loomed closer with every heartbeat. The autumn air was crisp as I stepped into the familiar local bar. A place I hadn't visited in what felt like ages. It was a Friday night, and my friends had planned to get together, hoping to drag me out of the shadowy confines of my thoughts. I forced myself to smile as I entered, greeted by the buzz of laughter and chatter that filled the room. I could see familiar faces gathered around a large table, and despite my heavy heart, I pushed through the door and joined them. As I approached, I noticed Mark sitting there, an old family friend I hadn't seen in years. His presence was comforting yet unsettling, reminding me of how easily lives could intertwine and then unravel. Mark had always been the easygoing type, full of laughter and charisma. But tonight, there was a weariness in his eyes that suggested he, too, had been through something difficult. "John, good to see you, man," he exclaimed, pulling me into a hearty embrace. I returned the gesture, though my heart felt heavy. It's been too long. How have you been? Keeping busy, I replied, my voice betraying none of the turmoil swirling within me. We exchanged small talk about work and mutual friends, but I could sense a shift in the atmosphere when I mentioned how I had been spending more time at the office. Mark's brow furrowed slightly, a knowing look passing over his face. You look a little worn out, buddy, he said, concern etched in his features. Everything all right at home? I hesitated, my instinct was to deflect. Just the usual stresses, you know, I said, forcing a laugh that felt hollow. But Mark wasn't one to let it go so easily. His gaze was piercing, and I could see he sensed that something was off. Listen, if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here, he offered. The sincerity in his voice was disarming, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the weight of my secret threaten to spill out. But I quickly steered the conversation away, redirecting it to lighter topics. I didn't want to drag him into my misery, and yet there was something in Mark's demeanor that made me feel like he understood more than I let on. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted from mundane topics to deeper discussions about relationships. I listened as others shared their stories, laughter filling the air. But beneath the joviality, I felt increasingly out of place, a lone figure surrounded by friends enjoying their lives while I was drowning in despair. Then, out of nowhere, Mark's demeanor changed. You know, I've been through something similar, he said, his voice lowering as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. My interest was piqued, and I leaned in closer. My wife cheated on me last year. It was like getting hit by a freight train. I was taken aback. I had known Mark for years, but I had no idea he had gone through such a devastating experience. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, feeling a strange sense of connection as he continued. It was rough, man. I felt like my whole world collapsed. We had been together for over a decade, and then one day I found out she was with someone else. He paused, his eyes reflecting the pain of that betrayal. I was angry, lost, and completely blindsided. His words resonated with me, pulling me deeper into my feelings of betrayal and confusion. How did you handle it? I asked, genuinely curious. I spent months trying to hold it together, just like you. I kept up appearances and acted like everything was fine, but inside I was falling apart. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized I needed to confront the situation, not just for her sake, but for mine as well. He looked directly into my eyes, a fire igniting in his expression. You can't let it consume you, John. You have to take control. I felt a flicker of hope mixed with apprehension. What did it mean to take control? I wasn't ready to confront Lillian, not yet. But hearing Mark's story gave me the courage to consider my options. What did you do? I asked, eager for guidance. I started focusing on myself. I picked up new hobbies, got back into the gym, and even began dating again. It was hard, but eventually, I realized I could find happiness again without her. Mark leaned back in his chair, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sorrow. But the best part was that I learned to embrace the anger and hurt instead of burying it. It was cathartic. I listened intently, feeling a swell of gratitude for his honesty. His experience mirrored my own, and yet it was a testament to resilience. I don't know if I could do that, I confessed, feeling the vulnerability creep in. It's all so overwhelming. Trust me, I get it. But you need to remember that you deserve better than this, he said, gesturing between us. You can't stay in a toxic situation just because you're afraid to shake things up. I learned that the hard way. The room buzzed around us, but at that moment, it felt like we were in our world. His words struck a chord, and a plan began to form in my mind. Maybe it was time to confront the truth, not just for Lillian but for myself as well. I appreciate you sharing this with me, Mark. It helps, I said, my voice steadying as I took in everything he had said. I just don't know where to start. Start by being honest with yourself, he replied, his gaze unwavering. Then, we can talk about a plan. There are ways to take back control of your life, and I can help you with that. At that moment, I felt a flicker of determination igniting within me. Mark's story, his journey of healing, opened a door I hadn't even realized was closed. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of possibility. Perhaps it was time to confront my reality and explore the path toward reclaiming my life. As the evening wound down and laughter echoed around us, I felt lighter, buoyed by Mark's unwavering support. I had spent so long grappling with my heartache alone, but now I had someone who understood the pain I was enduring. The night may have started with shadows, but as I left the bar, a small spark of hope flickered in my heart. A whisper of strength telling me that perhaps the tide was finally beginning to turn. After our conversation at the bar, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Mark had opened my eyes to the possibility of taking control of my life, but as we sat down over coffee the following week, I could sense there was more to his story. I was both anxious and curious, eager to hear how he had navigated the dark waters of betrayal and emerged stronger. "Listen, John," Mark began, leaning forward as we settled into a quiet booth at a diner. The atmosphere was relaxed, but I could feel the tension in the air as I awaited his words. "I've been thinking about how to get back at my ex, and it's led me to a plan that might help you, too." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "A plan? What do you have in mind?" Mark glanced around the diner, ensuring no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "I know what you're going through, and I want to help. I've been working on a scheme to expose infidelity, and I think we can use it to trap Lillian and Ryan." My heart raced as I considered the implications. "What do you mean by trap?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. I was still processing the idea of revenge. The thought of actively plotting against Lillian made me both excited and uneasy. Mark leaned back, a calculating look in his eyes. "I've devised a fake investment proposal that will lure them both in. Something that seems too good to be true, an opportunity they wouldn't want to pass up. Once they're in, we'll have the evidence we need to expose them." I felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought of bringing their betrayal to light. It was a chance to regain some control over the narrative, to turn the tables on the people who had hurt me. "What kind of investment are you thinking?" I asked, eager for the details. "Real estate," he replied confidently. "I've done some research on the local market, and I've come across a property that has the potential to skyrocket in value. I can present it as a unique opportunity for investment, something that will pique their interest. We'll create a story around it that makes it sound legitimate." As he outlined his plan, I found myself growing more and more engaged. Mark described the property as a rundown building in an up-and-coming area that had the potential for redevelopment. "We'll market it as a chance to flip it for a profit in just a few months," he explained, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "We can make it sound like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I nodded, my mind racing. "But how do we get them to buy in?" "We'll need to set the stage carefully," he continued. "We'll present the investment as if we're already in the process of acquiring the property. We can create fake documents, set up meetings, and even bring in a real estate agent to act as a front. The key is to make it all seem very real." As he spoke, I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. Part of me was still clinging to the hope of salvaging my marriage, but the other part was hungry for retribution. I had endured months of agony, and now I had the chance to turn my pain into something tangible. "When do we start?" I asked, surprising myself with my eagerness. "Right away," Mark said, his voice steady. "We'll need to gather all the materials and create a timeline for how this will unfold. I can help you with the documents and the research, but you need to be the one to pull Lillian and Ryan in. They trust you, and that will work to our advantage." I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach as I thought about how to lure Lillian into this trap. What if she suspects something? I can't risk blowing my cover. I cautioned. "Trust me, John. If you play it cool and act like nothing's changed, they won't suspect a thing," Mark reassured me. "Focus on proposing sound irresistible. I know you want to confront her, but this way, you'll have the proof you need to confront her on your terms." With each passing moment, my resolve strengthened. Mark's plan began to take shape in my mind, an elaborate scheme that would finally expose Lillian and Ryan for the betrayal they had inflicted upon me. The adrenaline coursing through me ignited a sense of determination that I hadn't felt in months. As we sketched out the details of the fake proposal, I found myself immersed in the process. We crafted a compelling narrative around the property, identifying its unique selling points and the potential return on investment. It felt surreal to be discussing something that had the power to unravel my entire world, yet it also felt liberating. "Let's set a date for the first meeting," Mark said, pulling out his phone. "We can invite them both, and I'll act as the agent. It'll make everything feel more official. The more legitimate it looks, the better." I felt a chill run down my spine at the thought of seeing Lillian and Ryan together under these pretenses. "What if they get suspicious?" I asked, the weight of the plan sinking in. Mark waved away my concerns. Don't worry about that. Just remember to keep it cool. We're not looking for confrontation, at least not yet. We're gathering evidence, and the best part is they won't even see it coming. As we finalized the details, a mixture of excitement and apprehension filled the air. I was about to embark on a journey that could either lead to my healing or further ruin. With each passing minute, I felt the stakes rise higher. I had never imagined I would be plotting revenge against the woman I loved, but in that moment, the thrill of the plan overpowered the uncertainty. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. Let's do this. The words felt foreign yet empowering, marking the beginning of a new chapter in my life. One where I would no longer be a passive observer of my pain. Together, Mark and I were about to execute a plan that would set everything in motion. I was ready to take control, to confront the truth, and to finally expose the betrayal that had shattered my world. The day finally arrived when we would present the investment opportunity to Lillian and Ryan. My heart raced as I prepared to face them, the very people who had shattered my world. Mark and I had spent weeks crafting the perfect narrative, and now it was time to put our plan into action. We set up the meeting at a small conference room in a local co-working space, a neutral location that lent an air of professionalism to our scheme. Mark arrived early to ensure everything was in place, and I could feel the tension mounting as I waited for Lillian and Ryan to arrive. I rehearsed my lines over and over in my mind, trying to maintain an air of calmness amidst the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. When they finally walked in, Lillian looked radiant, her smile lighting up the room. Ryan, on the other hand, exuded confidence, his charm spilling over as he greeted us. "Hey, John, Mark, thanks for inviting us. We're looking forward to hearing about this investment opportunity," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Absolutely," I replied, forcing a smile as I gestured for them to take a seat. Lillian sat down next to me. As the seasons changed and time passed, I felt the weight of my past begin to lift. I still held onto the memories, but they no longer defined me. I had weathered the storm, and now I was emerging stronger and more resilient. I had learned to appreciate the beauty in the journey, even in its imperfections. One evening, while watching the sunset from my apartment balcony, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. The colors painted across the sky reminded me that life was a canvas, constantly shifting and evolving. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. A hope that perhaps, just perhaps, I could find peace and happiness in this new reality. I no longer believed in a cosmic sense of justice or fate, but I did believe in the power of choice. I had chosen to take control of my life, to embrace new opportunities, and to move forward without looking back. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of excitement about what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace this new chapter, armed with the lessons of the past and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.